inclusion, and wealth redistribution. And the one to lead this panel is none other than Mary Imasuan.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for pronouncing my last name correctly. So I give it to Kenya. I'm from Nigeria, and the Nigerians can't pronounce my last name. So well done. First of all, I want to say karibu. Thank you for being here to listen to the talk. And I'm a little nervous. It's been a while I've been on this stage. But my talk is exploring Bitcoin's role in financial inclusion and wealth distribution. And for this talk, I want to call on stage Meron Estefanos. You guys, you can do better than that. Dr. Neil Quainor. Keep clapping until they come on stage. Lamar Wilson. Keep clapping as they come on stage. Oh my. Well, we're going to rock this stage together, Lamar. Hey, have a seat. All right. I think they've not showed up because you guys were not clapping enough. Maybe if you clap a little more. All right. So, unfortunately, I only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to get right into it. So, Lamar, welcome on stage. It's nice to see you again.
Oh, hey, this has been crazy.
Oh, yeah?
I was here 2 years ago, and this is just like getting really amazing. It was dope. I say this is the best conference in the world, and it's even dope. It's even better now. Woo! No, it really is. It's even better now, so.
I love that.
It's good seeing you, though.
Yeah, it's good to see you, too. I think this is the first time we're on a panel together.
Yeah.
So, one of the things about this talk that I found really interesting is the issue of financial inclusion and wealth distribution. We talk a lot about it in Africa, and we're even more aware of the problem of financial inclusion. Like where I'm from in Nigeria, about 80% or about 70 to 80% of the people in Nigeria are unbanked, which is quite interesting. And despite the current financial institutions, they're trying to make sure they reach more people. But I know we have a lot of guests from other countries who are not in Africa. And I wanted to start off this talk by touching 3 areas. One, painting a picture of what uneven distribution and financial inclusion looks like. So from your area of expertise, what does it look like, based on what you've seen so far?
Well, one of the things that I realized, and you said a certain percentage is unbanked, but to be honest, in the world, the global south is unbanked. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Meron, give her a round of applause.
The whole global south is really unbanked. We were talking about this last evening at dinner, talking about how many of the countries here in Africa have no access to the rest of the world from a financial standpoint because they get locked out, just like with visas. And I think that Bitcoin, of course, solves a lot of those issues because it's a global currency that no one controls, no one can debase, and no one can tell you cannot send it wherever you're trying to send it. And I think that's extremely, extremely powerful in the grand scheme of things because historically, the people who made a lot of unrest in these nations are the same people that keep you from actually participating in the economics of the world. And I think that is extreme injustice. And I think that Bitcoin solves a lot of that once we start creating the solutions to overcome it. So,
absolutely. And welcome, Meron.
Thank you.
You look lovely today.
Thank you.
I'm always so excited to have Meron on a panel with me. We were on the same panel last year as well. So, in the area of the work you do, especially with refugees, what does uneven, wealth distribution looks like among refugees? Because I really want the audience to know the clear picture of what it is? Because we know financial inclusion and like uneven wealth distribution looks like in theory, but I want to hear the stories. Could you share some with us?
Sure. I mean, thank you, and I'm very sorry for coming late. So refugees, you know, when you're fleeing from your country, a lot of people have this assumption that you are an economic migrant. But, you know, there are different reasons. It could be like that you fled from dictatorship. It could be, you know, all kind of oppression, right? And these people, when you have to flee as a refugee, basically is like someone is about to arrest you, someone is about to capture you, so you just leave without no ID, no nothing, and then you end up somewhere, right? So especially for us Eritreans, we are the largest refugee-producing country because of the indefinite military service, which means from 15 until you are 50, 35 years of your life is you basically a property of the Eritrean government. So of course everybody would flee because they know their fathers are in the military, their grandfathers are in the military for the past 30, 40 years. So you don't want to have the same kind of fate. So by 13, you're already planning your escape. And then you make it into a refugee camp in Sudan or in Ethiopia or somewhere else where you don't really have an opportunity as a refugee, right? So you go further to a country where you feel safe. So in the case of Uganda or elsewhere, Uganda and Kenya have actually the largest refugee community. And for these refugees, what it means is like they don't have ID, they don't have bank account. Basically, they depend on people on the outside that's sending remittance on a monthly basis. And often they are exploited because if I'm sending $100, it would cost me $110. I'm paying 10%. And so when the refugee gets the money, he's getting $90. So at the end, it's 20% is being taken away, right? So that's why my focus was, let me just focus on teaching the refugees because as a refugee advocate, I've been an activist for about 22 years dealing with refugees, and I saw that hardship, right? I don't know if we have time, but like that's the main reason why I got into Bitcoin, actually. I deal with refugees that get kidnapped and sold as slaves. And when these people are sold as slaves, basically, you can just buy them out, or they will be slaves forever. It could be in Libya, it could be in Egypt, it even happens in Sudan, now it's happening in Ethiopia. So these people, the only way you can buy them out, and in my case, there was an 18-year-old boy, Eritrean boy in Egypt, who was sold as a slave, and I was trying to rescue him. And the ransom was $33,000, and they gave me only an hour and a half to pay for his release, which was Western Union is $4,500 max. MoneyGram, $7,000, but I'm banned from using MoneyGram because I've used it too much. So an 18-year-old was killed because I didn't make the payment in an hour and a half. So when I was orange-pilled and I found out about Bitcoin, for me it was like, wow, if I use it, at least I can make it the payment within less than an hour, convert it into cash and make the payment, and that's how I got into it.
Wow, so what I got from your story and the stories of the experiences that you've seen is that financial inclusion and uneven wealth distribution isn't just a thing you experience, it's even part of your psyche. And it takes a while to get out of that mold, you know? In fact, like when I started my personal finance journey, it took me a while to break out of that centralized system. I felt like the centralized system was all there is for me. The highest I could ever go if I save my money in the bank is 2%, and that's it. And I can't imagine how psychologically people are not only enslaved in their body, but also enslaved financially. So my next question would be, why is it really difficult to get people on board? I know you two are both Bitcoin educators as well, and sometimes it takes a while for people to understand how Bitcoin can help these people, especially, like they know they're unbanked. They know they need access to money. But like, what is it that makes it so difficult for them to grasp how good Bitcoin is? So I want to paint this picture before we get into Bitcoin as a solution.
I think what I've seen is that people who don't have a lot, right, they focused on survival. And they're not thinking about Bitcoin and nodes. And so when I try to educate, part of my story is in back home, where I first started trying to educate people, was what people would consider the hood. The street that I was in the office of, if you say that street in my hometown, a lot of people say they don't want to go there, you know, that kind of place. And that's the first place I was telling people, listen, you need to get Bitcoin. This is awesome. This is what it'll do. But no one wants to listen to that at first if you can't solve their initial problems. I know a lot of people that say, if you fish for a person, they'll eat for a day. If you teach them how to fish, they'll eat for a while. But the problem is that some people are hungry before you teach them how to fish. So you got to make sure they get a fish first before you teach them how to fish. And I think that is like some part of the hurdle when trying to get the information to people who have just been oppressed by the systems, right? They're so busy trying to get out of that oppression that sometimes they can't see the lifeboat that is there for them. So you have to be patient and understand that that's, like you said, it's part of the psychology.
So before you go on, Miron, I just wanted to highlight something. That's why I love the project she's a founder of, Bitcoin Innovation Hub, because I feel like it really addresses what Lamar just mentioned, right? They not only teach people about Bitcoin, they give them the skills that they can use to empower themselves to make money to feed themselves and then save in Bitcoin. But yeah, please go ahead.
Well, educating Bitcoin can be a bit hard. Like in Europe, it was hard. And coming to Uganda, to a country that I have no connection, was a bit hard. You know, people always look at you suspicious. She has to have something in it. Why is she trying to convert me? Kind of thing. Yeah, and then people have been scammed as well. So like for our community, for the Eritrean community, so some people in Australia was saying, invest in this coin. It has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It was some shitty coin that they created. And so they basically told the community, you know, if you invest $50,000, guarantee 20% return every month and 200% return in a year. So they created an app where everybody was investing. So everybody's like, so the app shows you, you put $50,000, right? So the next day you look at it, it's $70,000. It just shows you. And so everyone is like, look at my money. Like I put 50 and now it's 70. And so others are now selling their houses, their investments, taking out all their saving, putting it in this coin. And then and the promise was whenever you want to take it out, so we will pay you in Bitcoin. So that's where Bitcoin was somehow mentioned in this scam. So when everybody got scammed, so the BBC Tigrinya, which office is here in Kenya actually, then publishes like a 6-page of article saying Bitcoin scams people. They have scammed like the whole entire diaspora Eritreans, which is a lie, right? So people hearing about this in Uganda or elsewhere will tell you, no, the BBC actually told us that it was a scam. So we have had actually at the Bitcoin Innovation Hub, when we first opened, the funny thing happened. This guy came, he saw our sign, Bitcoin, and then he walked in and he's like, I want to sell my Bitcoin, can you help me? And so we're trying to connect him to traders in Uganda. And then so but this guy didn't have a wallet. So basically he came with a Bitcoin logo sign saying he thought he owned a whole Bitcoin and came with the paper, you know, just printed logo saying, I would like to sell my Bitcoin. So we're like, are you joking? But this guy was for real. Someone did sell that to him. So it's very hard. But once you tell them, this will help you this way. So the thing is, educators have to think always is, how does Bitcoin help this person? Because if I'm teaching a woman, a Kenyan woman who makes $20 a month, me teaching her about Bitcoin is not really going to change her life because she can barely feed her kids with that $20, right? So always like we should know to whom to target, and it can be small business owners. For these people, it can help, right? So that's where we have to differentiate.
So by empowering people in such a way that they're able to, you know, run their own little business and accept Bitcoin, what changes have you seen in your community?
One of the things, and I brought this up the other day on the other panel, but there's a company called MavaPay in Nigeria, and I know a gentleman in the U.S. that uses it to pay people that he hires in Nigeria really easily, right? Because what it basically does is allow you to take a Lightning address, send Bitcoin to it, and then immediately that money goes directly into your Nigerian bank account as Naira. That is a really, really cool thing because you don't have to understand Bitcoin, right? You don't have to get a wallet. All you need to know is how to use the Naira banking system there to put your banking information in, and the money magically appears in your bank account. That's huge because whenever I hear wealth redistribution, the thing I understand about a lot of the global South Africa, South America, all of these places, is that the wealth is already there, right? The problem is that it has been pillaged, if that's a decent term to use, from these places. And so the whole idea is how do you gain control back over the wealth that you have under your fingertips, and then also have access to money that's coming from places where we tend to consume a lot, right? Because that's how you continue to get people involved into the economic society as a whole. And I think, like you said, using tools like MavaPay to get that money there, that will change a lot. I remember when they were talking about M-Pesa, and I don't want to get too far. When I first learned about M-Pesa, the thing that was such a powerful thing for me is that they were talking about they were able to lend M-Pesa to a woman that had 1 cow. And getting that M-Pesa allowed her to get 2 cows, which of course doubled her production. Yep. It blew my mind. I was like, oh, that is really cool. Because now you have access to actually increase your production 100%, which then, of course, for your family now you have. And so that whole idea is that if we can start allowing people, these amazing people that are here in Africa, to connect with the entire diaspora and have some way to be able to fund them and to spend money and invest, sky's the limit, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And Meron, I've been to the Bitcoin Innovation Hub, and I saw a lot of the cool stuff that they produce there. Like even, I don't know if you guys have visited the Fedi Lounge, you'll see my laptop bag is actually from the hub. So yeah, tell me, like, how has, people learning about Bitcoin and like creating stuff, how's that impacted your community?
So I can give you an example. We have 2 sisters last year when we opened Bitcoin Innovation Hub. They came and they didn't have any kind of skills. So they took the tailoring, fashion, and jewelry, all kind of stuff. You saw the pearl bags, and after 3 months they graduated, and now they own their own store. They sell purses that are much better than ours, actually.
What? Okay.
And then we have John here, somewhere around. I don't know where he is. John was among one of our first students when the war in Sudan started last year. So all the most of them had to flee, and so Uganda received a lot of Sudanese refugees and other refugees as well. So he was so much interested in Bitcoin and financial literacy. He's actually now our teacher. He teaches Bitcoin. And then we have Ola here, sitting down here. She's a refugee from Sudan. She had to flee because of the war, and now she manages the Bitcoin Innovation Hub, like with our staff and everything. So we've seen a lot of success, actually, seeing people that right now we are at 95% of our employees are refugees, people that we trained and that we ended up hiring.
That's so cool. So like, it's not just by them learning skills, it's also being gainfully employed and being paid in Bitcoin for the work that they put out there, which is really cool. In fact, the stories you shared reminded me of the first time I was paid in Bitcoin. This was 2015. So I got seriously into Bitcoin in the later part of 2020, but I was a freelance writer in 2015. And I had one client who was like, I want to pay you in Bitcoin. I didn't know what Bitcoin was. But for me, it was, and even though it didn't register early enough, it was a powerful moment because someone from several miles away was able to pay me for my work. I feel like Bitcoin really bridges that gap. In fact, there is like a huge migration issue that's happening in Nigeria. We have serious brain drain. Everyone's looking for greener pastures, and I've spoken to a couple of my friends. I'm like, where are you going? Just stay here and start offering your services across borders. And like, there are a lot of Bitcoin tools. You have MavaPay, you have other tools that will enable people to pay you, and you receive the money easily. And, of course, you know how it is in Africa. when you get paid, you think of your cousins and your mom, your dad, your aunties and uncle, and somehow the wealth gets distributed back to people. So I want to know what is something you could tell to someone who's like on the fence, right? They have amazing skills, but they're like, I don't think I'm ready to put my work out there outside Africa. Because look, we have great talent here. I'm sure you guys have seen it. Like, what do you tell such a person, such that they also get access to the wealth that is outside Africa?
I have found that that part's not really that hard because as long as you can get people the money, people will work. All the Africans that I know are hardworking people, and I try to have a call with a group of guys every week because they give me energy like never before. And I talk to them like literally every single week. And some of you guys keep coming up to me because evidently they've been telling you about me. So, so I hope I got a good name in Nigeria. But it's really cool because I think they understand they have skills. I just think that sometimes the barriers for entry are not really for them. It's really for the other side to understand that these people have skills because traditionally, from a development perspective, you don't think, oh, I'm going to go to Nigeria and get outsourced workers. Everybody's thinking about India right? They're never thinking about this population of Kenyans, this population of Nigerians that are extremely talented, really, really talented developers. And so I think, like, to get people off the fence, you just have to show them. Like, you literally have to, if you can, bring work to them, and they'll work their butts off and do a really, really good job. From the people I know. I'm not saying everybody's a dope developer. I mean, I'm sure you guys have worked with people who aren't dope developers, but the ones I've worked with have been extremely amazing. So,
how about you, Marilyn?
For me, it's a mixed feeling, actually. As a human rights activist, I don't like anyone being exploited. So I always encourage people to go out there and look for remote jobs, but I also tell them, like, make sure that you're getting paid well because there's a lot of exploitation. A lot of Africans can find easily remote jobs, but the problem is someone doing the same job in Silicon Valley is probably making $5,000 and above, while in Africa that person is getting hired for the same job for $200 a month. So there's a lot of exploitation in that, and I do encourage Bitcoiners, those that have companies, and move your companies here and pay people well. That's where it's not about skill, as you said. There are too many skillful people in Africa, but the exploitation is still there. So most of the remote jobs actually pay very little comparing to.
That is quite.
I think one of the things with moving a company here, though, is that's what we need to solve. Is that if you move a company here, like, how do you move the money back, right? I was watching, I think it's Emirates Airlines, and how they were having an issue in Nigeria, like getting money out because, again, the rest of the system basically keeps them out of it. They won't give them dollars. Like, they won't trade their dollars for Naira so that they can have the dollars to send back. And then, of course, because of that, the dollars are so scarce, the Nigerian bank doesn't want to give up the dollars they have. And so you wind up running into these crazy situations. And so I think we have to continue to try to build tools, not just for, like, the remittance for the smaller level, but we need to get up to the corporate level to allow those companies to move to Africa and be able to move money back and forth out of the global south. I think it's just...
Yeah, there's always a way for that, right? So I know a lot of people, as an African myself, like I've seen many Filipino in my country, same way they're not allowed to take out the dollar. So what they do is they purchase products and sell it and make more money on it, actually. So there's always a way. Yeah.
So I love the innovation, the way people are trying to find a way to ensure that they get access to funds.
Right.
In fact, I remember that, so since I'm in Nigeria, what you said is quite true. When you go into the banking hall, sometimes they say they don't have any dollars to give. I remember I and my dad went to the bank once to, someone sent money through Western Union, and we went to that branch, and they're like, there's no dollar in this branch. Please go to the branch on the other side. So we had to enter a car and go to the branch on the other side of the area where I was living. And, you know, I think that's why I didn't want this talk to be preaching to the choir, because most of us are Bitcoiners. But the thing about, that's why Bitcoin education is so important, because all these limitations that you guys have listed that are inherent to fiat, Bitcoin solves these problems, especially when it comes to moving money back and forth within a short period of time. But what would you say is the best way to transfer this information, you know, about Bitcoin? I'm more of a practical person, but I know that you guys talk to different audiences all the time. So what method did you see as more effective in educating these people about wealth distribution through Bitcoin?
I think it's just, again, sometimes obfuscating Bitcoin actually helps. Like making it work without saying Bitcoin and then coming back and saying, you know, they use Bitcoin. Now it's like, oh, really?
Can you give an example for some of us?
So that's what I'm saying. Like MavaPay is a perfect example. In Nigeria, if you get a MavaPay address, you sign up, and the people on the other side might need to know Bitcoin, but you don't. And you can get Naira directly into your bank account. So to me, that obfuscates Bitcoin out of the whole entire equation, but yet it's still being used because there is a market for Bitcoin in Nigeria. I think that helps. And then also from education standpoint, making sure that whatever it's just like when you teach someone the program, you tell them, build something that you want to make, like, because you'll learn the program better if you have something you want to make and not just reading. So if you can actually apply the Bitcoin into and give them a solution to a problem that they cannot solve without Bitcoin, then that tends to increase adoption faster. And we've even seen that, of course, in Africa from the standpoint of Tether. You guys taught me that in the first African Bitcoin conference. I wasn't a huge Tether fan, and then I came here and I was like, you almost kind of need it in some places, right? And so I backed off of it from like being so hard on it, because I was like, if you need it, then that's what happens. And I think the same thing with Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin even more so, because from the standpoint of Tether, it's still tethered to the US dollar that is losing value constantly. So you literally are just trading out a quicker depreciating currency for one that might be crawling a little slower, but it's still dying, right? And so hopefully we can get more people to understand that Bitcoin can be that currency that you actually can trade globally all over the world. And I think that's going to come. I think we'll get to a hyper-Bitcoinization. I don't know when, but I hope that it happens, because I truthfully think that's going to open the door up for everyone. That's going to provide more freedom for everyone.
What do you think, Meron? You have a unique experience because you deal with refugees from different parts of the world. So what's your take on this?
It does hold a lot, right? So for me, for example, like many countries, because of my activism, consider me an enemy because I criticize them. So anyone associated to me can be accused of treason or whatever it is, right? So Bitcoin did so for me. Like, so I always hire Africans, even though I live in Europe. So if there is any kind of job that someone can do remotely, so I prefer to hire someone in Africa. And up until 2020, about 259 people got arrested in Ethiopia because they had association with me or called my number, or I called that number. So later, what I did was like, I start paying them in Bitcoin, training these people, and this is how you do it. They're now Bitcoiners, and half of their salary, they manage to save it, and it's going great, right? But like earlier, I wanted to say, I actually wanted to add, how also I see, it worries me is, I see a lot of Bitcoinization in Africa, but at the same time, those that are using it, majority is like outsiders that own companies and things like that. As you said, they want to get out their dollars, but it's also looting, because instead of paying the 30% taxes that everyone else is paying here, outsiders are coming, opening companies, paying them in cash, and then converting their cash into Bitcoin and in millions. Like I know a trader that trades $2 million a day to the Chinese. And that scares me also. So we have to be careful. It's good to Bitcoinize, but at the same time, there has to be some kind of regulations, because African countries will be the losers, They will be looted more than the colonizers did.
Absolutely. Like creating that balance is so important. Because as much as you want to make sure that a lot of Africans are empowered. There are also people who are using it in the opposite direction. And that is true. I'm half Filipino as well, and in the Filipino community, there was this gentleman who said that he only gets paid in cash. And it was kind of strange. I'm like, okay, why is that? You know, other people get paid in their bank account, but he mentioned that he only gets paid in cash because they didn't want it to be traced. And I mean, if you are in that position, let's say you are part of an institution, like it's as a Bitcoiner, it's important for you to make sure that as you are employing people here and paying them in Bitcoin, you should not use Bitcoin for wrong ideas or wrong things, which is quite important. So I don't know how much time do we have? 1 minute, oh my gosh. Okay, so what is a message you want to send to young people, especially in Kenya? I know, so the reason why I say this is because we have a lot of Kenyans here, more than what we had in Ghana. So I would love a special message for the Kenyan youth who are learning about Bitcoin, who have a lot of skills that they want to share to the world. What's your message to them?
I would just say try to connect as much as possible. I think access is the biggest thing. And traditionally, access has been limited. You know, we know why, for several reasons around the globe. But I think the young people, we were talking about it last night, it's like if you know the story in the Bible of the people that were trapped in the wilderness, that generation, the old generation had to die off, and then the young ones made it to the promised land. And I think you young people in here, you guys are gonna make Africa the promised land for everybody in the world. I truthfully believe that because I see it. Every time I talk to you guys, you young women, young men, I see you guys, your mentality is so cold-blooded, so nice. I gotta stop using slang, but it's so good. No, your mentality is so great, and how you guys are coming together. And no matter what the country is, boundaries are not stopping you guys from working together. I've seen guys from Uganda trying to do stuff with a dude from the Cameroon. Like it's dope. It's really, really nice. And keep that mentality. Keep giving each other access, even when the people outside don't give you access to what they're doing, because the bigger the network you build here, the greater it'll be. And you guys, I think the next generation coming up is going to crush it so hard. Like, really, seriously, I really believe in Africa for real, from the young people's standpoint for real. So.
My message is, it's never too late to join, and a lot of people think they need to have $97,000 to buy a Bitcoin. No, you don't. You can start with 2,000 shilling actually, and try to put 2,000 shilling every month. That's what I encouraged.
Oh, that's awesome. So collaborate with each other, not only with people here, also people in other countries, and start saving in Bitcoin little by little. It will one day make a lot of sense. So thank you so much. Round of applause to our panelists.
Please, one more round as they head out. Make it louder, come on. Right, so it was a fantastic discussion, which I think I'll follow with some fantastic news. So the conference has organized something for the little ones. For those of you who have little ones, who'd want them to enjoy something within the building. We have a Bitcoin Santa Day for the kids on the gridless room, which is on first floor. And they have fun activities, they have Santa, and a ton of fun for them. Happening at 2 p.m., so if you're able to bring them on, please do. So our next panel is gonna be revolving around the regulatory landscape in Africa and the sort of challenges and opportunities that people can be able to take up to enable Bitcoin adoption. And to lead that is Charlene Fadirepo. Please, a round for her as she comes on.
Good morning, Africa Bitcoin Conference. Okay, we're on day 3. I'm super excited to be here with you today. My name is Charlene Hill Federico, and today we're going to talk about the one topic that impacts every Bitcoiner in this room, and we're going to talk about Bitcoin regulation. So I'd like to call to the stage my panelists. First, Senator Ihinian, who is a partner at Infusion Lawyers in Nigeria. Welcome to the stage, Senator. Thank you. And my second panelist, Emmanuel Babalola, who is the former director of Africa for Binance and the former interim CEO of Bundle Africa. Come closer to me, gentlemen. All right. Mic down here for him. Great. Excellent. So before we get started into the nuts and bolts of regulation, I wanted to just take a moment to have our panelists kind of talk about their experience. So these folks have been working in the Bitcoin space for quite some time, and I wanted to just make sure you had a sense of their background. So Emmanuel, can you kind of give us an overview of your background, and then over to Senator.
Thanks, Charlene. I'm Babs, Emmanuel Babalola. I first bought Bitcoin in 2016. And went all in since then. Today, I'm a builder and educator. Spent a lot of my time, bringing more people into Bitcoin. So far, I think we've done around 600,000 people. Just partnerships and collaboration with local communities across the continent, and just bringing people into the ecosystem. As a builder, I've worked on peer-to-peer systems across the continent. The likes of your Binance P2P that you use today, and Cashlink and Bundle, as you know it. So yeah, great to be here.
Very good. Senator?
All right, thank you. My name is Senator Ihinian. If you're wondering if that's a political title, it's not. It's my first name. I am the lead partner at Infusion Lawyers, a law firm I set up back in 2017 to be able to advise innovators across the emerging technology space. I head the blockchain and virtual asset service group of the law firm, and since then I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of innovators, but local and global players in the space. I am a former president of the Nigeria Blockchain Association, called Stakeholders in Blockchain Technology Association of Nigeria. And I currently am the legal officer for the Bitcoin blockchain community in Nigeria. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so if you ask anyone about Bitcoin regulation in Nigeria, or excuse me, in Africa, the answer is it depends, because there's a wide range of what's happening with regards to regulation in every country. So if we could start off, Senator, can you give us a sense of the key regulatory frameworks that exist across Africa?
Very interesting question. As you might have guessed, knowing that Africa is quite a fragmented market with a lot of countries, what we have noticed in the course of my work as an advisor in the space is that there are certain characteristics across board or across Africa, and then there are also unique features as well. For one, starting with Nigeria, there is no specific regulatory framework for Bitcoin in Nigeria, and this is also common across other African countries. What we have are subsidiary regulatory frameworks across areas like consumer protection, investor safety, as far as financial services are concerned. In Nigeria, for example, we have seen the Central Bank of Nigeria, after the initial ban in 2021, review its stance and introduced what it calls a framework that would enable virtual asset service providers get onboarded with banks and financial institutions in the country, subject to getting licensed by the Securities and Exchange Commission in Nigeria. If you go to South Africa, you find that compared to Nigeria, I think South Africa has some kind of more proactive approach to regulation. The Financial Services Conduct Authority has been particular about investor safety and consumer protection. And so what he has done is to approach Bitcoin from a point of view of a financial product. And South Africa hasn't bothered itself too much as Nigeria, regarding what Bitcoin is, whether it's a security, commodity, or whatever. South Africa, the Financial Services Conduct Authority has left that question to the individual regulators, such as the central bank, as well as other players in that space. Coming to places like Ethiopia, again, there are no specific regulatory frameworks, but it's been interesting seeing the role that a body like the Ethiopian Investments Holdings have been playing. They sort of are taking a business approach to this, and so there is, as I'm aware, some kind of investment program for Bitcoin miners in Ethiopia. And I see that Bitcoin miners have taken advantage of that, and also perhaps the relatively cheap access to electricity or power, to set up in that regard. In Kenya, I have to say this. Kenya, the approach of regulators in Kenya has been greatly informed by this prevalence of scams, Ponzi schemes that really have nothing to do with crypto. As the initial former speaker was saying, it's not really Bitcoin scam, but being that these guys use Bitcoin as one of the means of payments, then Bitcoin gets involved. And so Kenya, especially the Central Bank of Kenya, has been pretty restrictive regarding Bitcoin in the country, taking more of a consumer protection approach in that regard. I'm aware that legislators are looking at this area, and very soon they will introduce some kind of framework in this regard. So this is how it's been across Africa. Maybe I should mention one North African country, right? Egypt, for instance. Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, mention them. There are no specific regulatory frameworks. We've seen a lot of fear around central banks, thinking that Bitcoin might, make central banks lose control of monetary policy and financial stability, which are concerns across the globe as well. So basically, no frameworks in that regard as well.
Very good. And I think what I'm hearing is that there's a wide range of government stances on Bitcoin. So we have, on the far end, we have some governments that are very supportive. And then on the other end, you have governments that are super restrictive. I'd like to spend some time talking about the key factors that drive those stances on Bitcoin. Emmanuel, want to start?
Yeah, happy to. So the key factors that I would say drive the current sentiments, like across continents, are mostly around capital controls. As you would know, most African countries have a similar trait, which is, over time, the currency devaluation issue just, happens across board. And central banks, whose main responsibility is, one, securing the financial stability of these countries, are required to step in, right? So you'd find that a lot of countries have warnings on participating in Bitcoin because it serves for quote-unquote capital flight in their definition. Now, that is a concern that obviously we are engaging, with the regulators that are very pro Bitcoin to kind of try to solve, right? Because at the end of the day, Bitcoin is not the problem itself, right? It's a part of the solution, as it were. Other concerns are around consumer protection. Obviously, scams have done a lot for the reputation of Bitcoin, right? Though bad at the beginning, but I think by and large today, a lot of people are more savvy of what this technology really is. It wasn't as easy as this before. Like before, it was so bad. But today, because of education, a lot of people are now more aware of what crypto is, what Bitcoin is, how to identify scams, how to identify fraudsters, how not to send your money to someone you just met on Telegram, right? So there are a bunch of scams that led to a lot of warnings as well on, especially from the Securities and Exchange Commissions across board in terms of, saying, oh, this platform is a scam platform, or this platform is not protecting its customers, right? So those are some of the concerns. And then obviously, because of how technical it is, people find it difficult to, get in. And I know there's been a lot of work across the continent by, builders who are, driving scalable solutions that can help onboard more and more people. Those are some of the concerns that have affected success factors so far.
Very good. Senator?
Yes, if I may just add to that, across most African countries and economies is the issue around inflation, right? As well as remittances. In places like Nigeria, Ghana, perhaps even Kenya, there have been issues or concerns around the effects or potential effects of Bitcoin adoption on the value of the local currencies. In Nigeria, for instance, we have seen regulators, including the Central Bank of Nigeria, take certain actions based on what they believe is the possible influence, whether true or false, of Bitcoin on the local currency, the Naira. So there have been allegations up to the courts in Nigeria regarding some kind of monetary policy manipulation, money laundering, terrorism financing, and the rest of that. Yeah, it really cuts across Africa, and it affects adoption, as it were.
And while we're on that point, you talked about the certain actions that the Nigerian government has taken. I'd love to have you just share a few of those actions. These are things that some folks might be aware of, but the Nigerian government has been very specific in terms of the steps that they've taken to curb the use of Bitcoin. Senator?
Yes, thank you very much. That global news you got in 2021
yes.
about Nigeria banning Bitcoin and other, currencies in Nigeria. That was February 2021 when the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, had fears and concerns about what Bitcoin could do to the banking and financial system. I think the major concern at that time, I believe, must have been informed by some misconceptions about Bitcoin and how it works. The government saw Bitcoin as an anonymous private currency, which technically isn't quite correct. And that affected how the central bank approached players in the sector. According to the governor then, he did say that there's a lot of opacity in the markets. Transactions are happening in very dark places, and criminals and bad actors might just put the entire banking and financial sector in a lot of trouble. And so it single-handedly, just by a mere circular, suspended the KYC system in Nigeria, which, by the way, is established. That KYC system in the country is established by a law of the National Assembly of Nigeria, the Money Laundering Act. At the time, I was, fortunately or unfortunately, the president of the Blockchain Association. And myself and my co-leaders and stakeholders, including Babs here, we had that responsibility of trying to show the government and the central bank that this is not what you think.
Sure.
And we think that this is how it should work. Guess what happened? Just to quickly wrap this up. That circular led to transactions, not disappearing, but going on the ground. And when it went on the ground, within 14 to 18 months, Nigeria became the biggest peer-to-peer market in the crypto space globally. because a lot was pushed away from the banking system to on the ground. And
Can you share
that's-
what year that was?
What?
Can you share what year that was?
Yes, that was by 2023.
Yep.
We had discovered this. The central bank was also seeing this and wondering, oh, so the ban hasn't worked. It has only made people go out of the system. And you know, the way that Bitcoin works, really, if we really want to look at it, Bitcoin wants to be left alone.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin doesn't need regulation. So when regulators think that they are doing all of us a favor by regulating, I always try to say that, no, it's not about doing us a favor. You're also doing yourself a favor, because if you don't regulate Bitcoin, it goes on the ground. If it goes on the ground, what happens when earthquake happens? Everything on top of it goes away. And that is the financial system. And that's why I say that regulators, and I continue to emphasize, that regulators need to understand Bitcoin, how it works, the risk around it, the potentials, opportunities, and then take a risk-based approach so that we can have the level of transparency and visibility needed to ensure the integrity in the sector.
And so with all of that backdrop of relatively restrictive regulations, I'd love for my panelists to comment on whether or not they think the business climate, the regulatory, let's start with Nigeria, is it conducive for business, right? Are we spurring innovation? Are we allowing these entrepreneurs to get the support that they need to build solutions for communities? Emmanuel, could you start?
Yeah, so there's been a lot that happened, right, as you must have seen in the news. But just to recap, as I said, 2021, we had the ban. In 2022, we had in fact, in the same year, 2021, we had the e-Naira launch. In 2022.
And can you tell us what the e-Naira is? This is important, the CBDC.
Yeah, so the CBDC e-Naira in Nigeria, was the attempt of the government to, step into the crypto industry, as it were, and, play around it.
And did that work?
It didn't work.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. But then that's a whole other story. In the year 2022, we had the blockchain strategy document that we, collaborated with the government to create, which today guides the country as regards to its blockchain strategy. We also have in 2023, last year, December, a rollback on the ban, right, from the central bank. So Nigeria specifically, to answer the question, today has a regulatory framework for operating within the blockchain crypto industry. This is now talking about entrepreneurship. There are 2 licensed exchanges, and we have around three other licenses that we're giving to token issuers, and then there are 2 sandbox. So around 7 licenses were issued sometime this year. So while the whole thing that happened with Binance was very tragic, I believe that the country is in the right direction towards opening up for business again.
Very good. Any comment on
Yes.
business climate?
Yes, it's really interesting how things are evolving in African markets as far as Bitcoin adoption and regulation is concerned. So away from the early 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, when most of the central banks appear to be attending the same meetings, issuing circulars and warning people about Bitcoin adoption and all that stuff. What we are seeing now is there has been relatively a more informed approach. In Nigeria, for instance, the new governor under the new administration, as Babs has pointed out, had to review the entire thing and introduce a framework that brings virtual asset service providers on board. That incubation program that Babs also talked about has really brought some level of trust and confidence back into the markets. I also would mention that this is not just Nigeria alone. In South Africa, right, a jurisdiction I've admired for some time because they have decided to learn adaptively, right? Rather than say, we don't understand this, so get out of the room, they've decided, you know what, there are consumers whom we need to watch out for. So while we are trying to understand the technology, let's still have certain frameworks in place to ensure trust and confidence in the markets. And so that's what the Financial Services Conduct Authority is doing in South Africa. And I'd like to recommend that other African countries should also look at that. It's not all the time you have everything worked out from day one. It's not possible. Not even in the UK, the US, and other advanced countries do they have these things worked out. So we need more adaptive, risk-based approach to ensuring that there's some balance between innovation and regulation, because they are our consumers we need to protect, not just the innovators.
Very good. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about Bitcoin adoption. I'd love to hear your perspective around Bitcoin adoption across various African countries. And then I'd like to hear about the success stories, the companies that are being built that are driving Bitcoin adoption. And either one.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great question. So Bitcoin's adoption in Africa has been, a very interesting story. I've always been one of the biggest believers in Africa and the fact that Bitcoin has the most use cases here, right? From cross-border payments to remittances, these are key use cases that across the continent has made Bitcoin thrive, right? And one of the things you'd find from country to country is that we have more and more people trying to send money home who now can do that at a fraction of the cost and at a fraction of the time. You have more and more, because just generally, just as a Nigerian, for instance, I need around 30 visas to visit all of Africa.
Did you say 30?
Yeah, 30 visas.
To visit every African country? To visit nearly every African country?
Yeah, to visit nearly Africa. I visited maybe half, but you need that much visas to go. And then let's say you have a French passport, you could do that without any visas for most of the countries. So Africa as a continent amongst Africans is very fragmented, right? So it's so difficult to send money from Kenya to Malawi, for instance, right? How do you even get started? So Bitcoin solves that in a very simple way. And you find a lot of builders. You have guys like Otani Pay, you have guys like Treasurer, you have guys that are building amazing products, right? At Bundle, we grew to over 1 million users before we were acquired. And literally, all we're doing was just helping people send money easily. I think the biggest use case you find for Bitcoin is that in Africa specifically, it has helped Africans connect, right? That's one. Now, two is obviously with the inflation I mentioned earlier, right? African currencies are devaluing, and, obviously that is something that, is making Africans poorer. So a lot of people have found that Bitcoin as an asset helps to hedge against that, right? And you can't really stop it, right? People want to save money in a way that, in 5 years, at least it will retain the value it was today at the barest minimum, right? So those are kind of main use cases that has helped crypto. It's not about trading in the markets. It's not about futures, even though there's still a lot of people doing those kind of stuff. But just the core of daily living, sending money and, taking care of your family. There are people that back then when play to earn was a thing, we had students who were literally earning $20 a day just playing games. And to today, I think it still happens, right? So we've seen Bitcoin take a lot of young people out of poverty in Africa, right? And I think that success story is something that should be talked about a lot more.
Yeah, very good. So basically, Bitcoin as kind of a financial escape hatch to poverty, just using and saving. And I think what I like about what you pointed out is that these aren't high-tech traders. These are everyday people. These are everyday people that are choosing Bitcoin as the better choice of money. Senator?
Yeah, it's amazing how adoption in Africa has evolved relative to other regions. I think Africa has the most genuine use cases for Bitcoin. There is a grassroots adoption, retail adoption. We're yet to have the institutional investors come in, understandably because, one, there's capital issue, two, there are regulatory issues. But essentially, this is something that is community and people-led, and that's powerful. When Babs was sharing his success story, I just would like to claim that I'm also part of his success story in terms of what we work together.
Very good.
I'm legal compliance part, is the, what someone would call a whiz kid
Nice.
in that area. We've seen, Charlene, you wouldn't believe it, when a country like Nigeria was facing issues around dollar liquidity, and merchants, legitimate businessmen in Nigeria, could not have access to dollars to be able to do transactions with their Chinese and other partners outside of the country. BAP's innovation helped them to be able to access that. They were able to rely on Bitcoin to, get to do those transactions, and business have continued, right? So I would like to emphasize that very far from what some regulators in Africa think, that Bitcoin is killing the economy or may kill the economy, what we have seen is that it has provided an alternative financial option for those who may not otherwise have access to, the traditional system. And we have to stop that idea of saying, you read from a regulator, and the regulator tells you that the reason why we're not in your space is because it's not regulated.
Right.
Are you serious? Am I going to regulate it or you? You're a regulator, and you're saying the reason why we're not there, it's because it's not regulated. In other words, you haven't done your job.
Sure. And Senator, I think what I'm hearing from you is that regulators think that Bitcoin is breaking the economy, but you're saying that Bitcoin is building the economy. And that's a great segue to the future. I'd love to hear about the future regulatory trends that you see across Africa.
Okay, so I am so bullish on the continent, right? I feel like, we are at such a pivotal moment when it comes to the adoption and the regulation of this industry. One of the things that I think highlights that, he just said something about how a regulator would say, I know the regulator is talking about anyways, how a regulator would say that they're waiting for regulation to come. And that is foreign Western regulation, right? And I think that has been, by and large, solved. Now it's at least in the US, where there is now a very strong voice, charging, the entire industry.
And that took 3 years, because before that in the US, it was regulation by enforcement
Exactly.
in this industry.
So I can say for a fact that, African regulators will just align, right? And, so just get ready, guys. The market is opening up very, very soon.
Very
So
good.
please.
Senator?
Yes, regarding future trends, I think that more people will rely on Bitcoin for things outside of investments, remittances, local payments on e-commerce platforms, and your regular local malls. They will integrate Bitcoin. And I think that this is where those developers who are building wallets and all of that will be able to take advantage of the markets. Currently, also regarding Bitcoin wallets, Bitcoin ATMs, all right? In my work as an advisor in the space, we have seen players who want to bring in Bitcoin ATMs into various African countries. But this has been met with some level of, hurdle, right? Because there is this issue around what the central banks think. So I think that going forward, the future trend is to watch out for more use for Bitcoin ATMs, in African countries. And lastly, from a regulatory point of view, I think that the central banks across Nigeria, across the world, Africa, will realize that apart from the investment use case for Bitcoin, there is also the remittance payments use case for Bitcoin, for which they would need to then introduce regulatory framework that is distinct from that one that comes within the purview of the Securities and Exchange commissions across various countries. Why have I said this? In a place like Nigeria, for instance, you find that the CBN has basically said, we will allow you do business with our banks. You can open accounts, but please go get a license from the SEC first. There is a problem with that. The future trend would be that the CBN will eventually realize that there are players who use Bitcoin, not for investment and commodities purposes, but for payments, which comes back to the regulatory purview of the CBN. This will also go across Africa.
Please.
So just to add, to that, as we all know, Bitcoin exists both as an, as a payment system and also as an asset, right? And what you just talked about is the trend, which is a lot of, regulators are focused on the asset, which is, SEC licensing and stuff. A lot of the payment use cases, which, I've emphasized over and over again in this panel, are kind of like going to be, front and center very soon, where, established fintechs today who are already even using Bitcoin as a layer, to do settlements versus your, SWIFT, it's going to become more and more, prevalent, right? And remittance companies and the major players in remittance would also realize that they can do, a lot more if they, plug in Bitcoin. So I think that's just something to add as well.
Okay, really quickly, we have time for about 5 more seconds of closing thoughts. What advice would you give to founders that are building Bitcoin businesses in this changing regulatory environment?
Yeah, so for founders in the house, I believe that it's not been easy, obviously, and, we've continued despite, the challenges. I think it will get a lot better, especially from the regulatory perspective, going into the next 5 years. So, we just all need to get ready for that and, become more pro-regulation as builders and, advise and support governments as they figure this out. Thank you.
Senator, closing thoughts?
Yes,
2
and
seconds.
as governments across Africa try to figure this out, I imagine that innovators and builders in the house would at least still want to innovate. So I would say that you should approach this from 2 perspectives or angles. One, you must have those self-regulatory mechanisms that you adopt just to ensure that you don't get into troubles. So pay some more attention to things around money laundering compliance in terms of making reporting, registering with the relevant financial intelligence units in your countries to ensure that at least you are showing you are not a bad actor. Secondly, it is the other aspects of the external regulatory frameworks that you need to comply with. They will come, sometimes they will not. Sometimes they will be clear. Sometimes they will not be clear. Most times they will never be clear or certain. But that shouldn't stop you from playing. That's where you should speak with professionals and players who have done this to ensure that you are able to navigate the entire African markets in a way that is safe, and as well you can maximize the huge opportunities in the African continent, especially with this AfCFTA coming up, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's basically going to make Africa, the whole of Africa, the fragmented markets, one market. If it's one market, I see services, wallets, platforms being able to integrate and do a lot of stuff together in that space. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. That's our time. Thank you for your insights, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot. Now, yesterday, I remember we were at some point acknowledging the countries that were present or have been able to participate in this conference. However, I realized that there's one country that was not represented in the recognition. And that country is here being represented by just one person. So in a very special way, I'd like us to appreciate Ola from Sudan, please. Thank you very much. Right. And then there's an announcement. We're going to have an after party at the end of our conversations today. So they've insisted that we don't miss it, right? Okay. So we have a third panel coming up that will be led by Lamar Wilson. Yay. And the conversation is about Bitcoin being a safety net for the working class.
Hello, everyone. Probably tired of seeing me up here. As you can see, I have some new gear on. If you want this wonderful scarf, please go out to the desk out there. Chef is cooking it up really good for you. So, let's see. So, our panel today is around Bitcoin in the workforce. And we have some amazing panelists with us today. And let me get them up here. We have first Okin. Hopefully, am I going to say? Hold on 1 second. Let me say your name correctly. Okin Tenjagarero. I'm a and then Dom Bay. Dom Bay. Please welcome both of them today. Yes. How do you say that? Songarero. So it's great to have you guys up here today. I'm gonna let you guys introduce yourself and tell the audience what it is that you do. You have a mic? You have a mic? Okay.
My name is Dom Bay. I am a fire captain from Santa Monica. I work for the Santa Monica Fire Department. And I started a nonprofit called Proof of Workforce, whose mission is to help workers, wage earners, labor unions, pension funds, and sometimes municipalities learn about Bitcoin with education-based initiatives and help them get off zero.
I know I should have gone first. My name is Oken, or Nikolai Shongarero. I'm the founder of EasySats and Bitcoin Mining Namibia. Basically, with EasySats, what we do is we try to make it that Namibians aren't left behind in this, global rush for knowledge of what Bitcoin is and how to utilize it. So we try to make it easy for people to understand how to get their Bitcoin, how to store it properly, and how to utilize it without needing to come back to us. And in that, we talk to regulators, we talk to industry leaders to make sure that they don't just understand Bitcoin from an outside perspective of what they were told, but literally from what they can see from a proof of work perspective.
Thank you, guys. And I guess this panel is about us exploring basically what's going on in the financial system and how it is affecting people that are working, people that are actually wage earners, and how you guys are trying to alleviate some of the pains that they deal with. Can you tell us, either one or both, what do you feel like is wrong right now with the current financial system? Like, what is... And it's different. It's going to be different, right? We have Santa Monica from the U.S., right? And we have Okin from Namibia. So it's going to be a little bit different. So I would love to hear what you guys think both ways, what's wrong with the financial system.
From a Namibian perspective, our banks are pretty predatory. Like the central banks themselves put out, like last year, I think it was the beginning of this year, end of last year, they put out a report on all of the banks and the point of sale machine charges, like the bank charges for each bank for just holding money for a month. And what you saw from that was the central bank didn't hide anything. They were like, yo, this is wrong. Like, what you guys are doing and how you're charging people
Right.
is insane. So from that standpoint, we could infer a lot of things. Like, I'll give you an example. There's 9 banks in Namibia, right? Across the 9 banks, if you take all their point of sale charges and you average them out, that comes down to every time you swipe, you're using $3 Namibian in charges, right? And at the same time, I took my last 9 Bitcoin transactions, like buying stuff like food and whatever, and I averaged out the costings, and it was 81 cents. So that difference for a person that's maybe not earning that much, but I have to spend, like, from my bank account every time I'm losing money. You know what I mean? So a lot of people can't see that because they have never had a alternative to that system. It was just, this is how it is. But since that report came out from the Central Bank of Namibia, it really opened a lot of people's eyes to, yo, we're getting robbed for our own money by putting it in the bank. So I'd say the real problem is not just what the banks are doing, but how they're able to hide it, what they're doing, like underneath the assumption that it's the norm, you know?
Yeah, that's right on. Ultimately, for the wage earner, the financial system is a fine-tuned machine that has perfected the art form of extracting time and energy from the wage earner, 1, without them knowing it, and 2, with no recourse. And how do they do that primarily? Through running deficits and printing money out of thin air. So they bypass proof of work completely. And for the wage earner, this is like being, a fish in the sea, and you have a shark, and that is the financial system that is deadly hunter as far as extracting that time and energy from the wage earner.
So I guess the next question I have is, why is Bitcoin the solution to these problems?
So on the flip side of what we just talked about as the problem, Bitcoin is the opposite. It is a machine that is being fine-tuned and perfected to protect the time and energy of the wage earner. And so in this sense, right, it's the complete opposite of that. It is a protector of the wage earner. And so if you are going to put your time and energy into working, if you're going to go work a construction site, if you're going to work as a firefighter, you are sacrificing your labor, your time, your energy for something in return, as we mentioned, that is being basically, that's being extracted from you, what you've earned. Bitcoin's the opposite. It is protecting that by making it mandatory to engage in proof of work, where you cannot bypass proof of work to engage with the system.
Well said, well said. Just to add on to that, I think with Bitcoin, it gives people a sense of like what is actually happening. They don't even know that they have low time preference while they're dealing with the banks until you introduce something like Bitcoin and they're like, what do you mean I can increase my purchasing power over time by just, holding this? And then it just opens. I'll give you an example. You were talking about construction workers. So one of my really good friends, known him since I was 6 years old. Like he's a construction worker. He helps build banks and stuff. But he doesn't have a bank account. He's never had a bank account in his life because he's like, I don't understand why you get to take from my money. When I introduced him to Bitcoin, he was like, what do you mean? Like, literally, he attended one Treasury Academy session and his mind, the switch flipped on for him. And he's out there busy telling people, you need to understand, if I give you $1 million Namibian today, and I tell you got to hold it for a year, you're not going to have $1 million. Like, even though you didn't spend anything just by leaving it in the bank. But if I give you 1 million Satoshis today, and you hold it till next year and you didn't spend it, you're going to have 1 million Satoshis. That in itself is like a mind fart for people. They're like, what do you mean? So Bitcoin is a solution to a problem people didn't even know was there. It was like behind a curtain. And now it's just got a light on it where they're like, oh, wait, this is an actual problem in my life because I'm losing value every day that I worked for. Again, I put in those proof of work and you're able to extract it with no proof of work from me. So Bitcoin solves that for me, or for them, for everybody, I think.
Right. I love having this panel because you're seeing it from 2 different perspectives, right? From the States and then here in Africa. And the States, of course, has the benefit of having the global reserve currency for the most part. You can go anywhere in the world and people will take dollars. But that's not necessarily the same with many of the currencies here in Africa. And so I think this next question is going to lean toward what are some of the challenges that you have with getting workers to look at Bitcoin as an alternative for freedom. And I want to see what's the difference between you guys. Is it easier in Africa because they have a more prevalent problem, like the problem is in your face, whereas it's like the slow drain in the United States, like the slow leak in the tire, right? So I would love to hear this. Because both places have inflation issues. Let's not get it twisted, right? But one just seems, people don't recognize it in one place, and the other place you can see it more prevalent. So what do you guys think about that?
So there are a ton of challenges in orange pilling a wage earner, right? Especially on something new as Bitcoin. But here's the number one that I have found, and I'm going to use an example of this room. If we were let's say we were talking about some subject, history, math, or science, whatever. If I set a fire in the middle of the room, I highly doubt that us here would be focused on what I'm saying and listening and learning, right? And why is that? It's because the fear emotional response takes over completely. And we underestimate the power of fear in our daily lives. And for workers and wage earners, the fear that exists in them from what I would describe as one of the most successful decade-long attack campaigns on Bitcoin cannot be overstated. That fear is real. So in the challenges of orange pilling workers in the workforce, an initiative that you put forward has to neutralize that fear so they can learn what this thing is that they're holding. It's so important, and I would say it's the number one challenge that I've found.
From a Namibian perspective, what I found is there's a lot of scams. You have to understand, like when people are not able to earn money, when you have an unemployment rate that's probably higher than 40%, we still haven't gotten the figures, the official figures yet. But when this is your reality, and people are coming to you saying, hey, I have the answer to your problems, and your auntie got scammed by something else, and your friend got scammed by something, and people will come and they'll be like, I know somebody that got scammed by Bitcoin, and you're like, no, they got scammed by a scammer. Bitcoin didn't even know you were there. So like, the first hurdle that I have is the misinformation hurdle of like, what is Bitcoin in a Namibian context? And then from there, it's a thing of like, okay, how do I describe it to you? Because I cannot come to you and talk to you about decentralization, peer-to-peer marketplaces and things like that when you're thinking, how am I getting bread on the floor, on the table tonight? You're not even thinking about that type of context. So now I need to come to you and have a conversation. And I think the biggest problem was initially, I was trying to orange pill people instead of having a conversation with people and saying, okay, what are your pain points? And let me see how Bitcoin solves that. So I think that was my biggest hurdle, even beyond the scams.
No, I think that's awesome because, of course, we in the States, we orange peel, right? We're not talking about the same problems you're talking about. But like you said, when you're talking about your problems, it's a whole lot, like you have to meet people where they are, like I said earlier. And I think that's pretty cool. But here's my question. What are some of the best practices you've seen that actually have gotten people to basically jump on that life raft? Like, how have you gotten people off the Titanic, so to speak?
Well, for me, it's, again, the conversation helps because they see you hearing them, not speaking at them, right? So that's one of the biggest ones is like not to speak at people, but to speak with them and try to bring them into the solution that they are saying, oh, I think I understand what the solution is, instead of like you telling them the solution. And the second one is like showing them how Bitcoin works. I always tell people, well, recently, like, don't tell them how to play the PlayStation, put the controller in their hand. None of us learned how to play TV games by people telling us how to do it. It's because we used the tool. We actually had it. So that for me is the greatest thing, is to say, not just give them Bitcoin and say, hey, come with me. Let's go to the bar. Let's argue about Bitcoin, and then I'm going to pay for our drinks and food in Bitcoin because they accept Bitcoin. That does something in somebody's mind to say, wait. You just paid for our food? Like, so I think for me, it's really the proof of work, but public proof of work.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah, I think not letting individuals and groups, don't let their risk or their perceived risk outpace their understanding of what Bitcoin is. I'll give you an example of that. Santa Monica firefighters, the first union in the United States to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet, we started them off with an initiative that was $1 per member. Now, when you hear that, you go like, what? Like, that's not meaningful, it's not impactful. Well, what it does is, anytime you have a group of people, there's about 10% on one side and 10% on the other side and 80% in the middle. When you reduce the fear and the risk, you allow people to evaluate the opportunity for what it is, and you don't let the small vocal minority of the fear mongers, they can't take over. Because imagine if us in this room, we all just put $1 in Bitcoin, and then someone came up and said, you guys are crazy, you're gonna lose your money, this is gonna be the end of the world, and you say, whoa, you're like, are you okay? Are you upset? Like, are you good, bro? Like, let's learn about this thing. And so neutralizing that, and as far as effective tools, like Okim was saying, taking them like making it not so scary. Just saying like, let's touch this thing. Let's open a wallet. Let's send some sats. And there's like so many people doing great work on that here.
Yeah, I think early on in Bitcoin for me, we used to give Bitcoin out a lot. Like, that's the thing. Get your wallet, man. Here's some Bitcoin. That's how it was, right? And I think the whole new number go up hodl crowd doesn't like to give away Bitcoin to new people. But I think it is extremely powerful, even if it's $1, right? There's a guy that hits me up. I gave him $5 worth or something. Yeah, and he always is like, I owe you lunch every time I see him, right? And I think that's the kind of thing. Like, you start giving it out. You start basically giving. And I think that's how another way they can get the adoption.
If I can just quickly, I just want to add to that. That wouldn't work in Namibia. I started out with that.
You did?
Giving people Bitcoin, because I was earning Bitcoin, so I would use my own Bitcoin and give it over. But what I realized is people don't want handouts, right? I already earned Bitcoin, so what I did was I switched it from giving people Bitcoin to showing them how they can earn it, right? For things like playing games, writing an article, reading an article, listening to a podcast, things they were already doing but didn't know that they could earn Bitcoin for. That has a longer, but in Africa, like in a Namibian context, I can see how giving them $1 could also do the same thing. But yeah, I think that earning is a good one to add to it.
No, that's awesome to know. That's the reason why I love this panel. Because we don't get this all the time, right? Especially in the States, like, we don't hardly have panels where we have like the same problem, right? But two different types of solutions depending on where we are. I guess, how much time my time person's not there. How much time do I have left? Nobody knows.
You know,
let's just stay here all day.
Since this is a working class panel, we can't have time card theft.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, don't be stealing our time, you know?
Yeah, let's, because I just want to make sure we stay on top of it, but let's keep going. I guess my question is to you, how often do you find people that are afraid, like the fear thing you were saying, in both places, that you've been able to flip? Like, they're afraid first, and then how did you flip them from being afraid to this being the best thing that they've seen? Like, how did you, tell me, because people need to know so they can have something practical to take home. Like, what do I need to do to get this person off of zero, as you say?
So you mentioned meeting people where they are, right? And as Bitcoiners, our instinct a lot of the times when people vocalize their fears about misinformation is to argue with them about how they're wrong, right? Bitcoin's bad for the environment. What's their response? No, it's not. Here's why. Bitcoin, you know, you're going to lose it. It's a scam. No, it's not. Here's why, right? And so meeting them where they are and just letting them have those things and saying, that's okay if you believe that, but can we still learn about this thing and do something very small that's risk-free? That's what I found.
I think for my part, again, it's a relational thing. When like he was saying, like Dom was saying, go meet people where they are. Like, literally, where you go. Like, start at, what's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite bar? Go there, pester them for a while. That's what I did. And they were like, Okan, we're tired. We'll give you a venue, like, you get the venue for free. Just come and throw an event. And then after the event, they were like, okay, what do you want to do? And I was like, what's your slowest selling day? They were like, Thursdays. I was like, what's the cheapest stuff on your menu? A beer and burger. I'm like, every Thursday, I'll sit here from lunchtime till you guys close, and I'll argue with people about Bitcoin, about why it's not what they think it is. If you guys allow me to do burgers and beers for Bitcoin, right? And then you guys just hold it until if you feel uncomfortable, I'll take it from you. But what happened was they held it for 3 years, right? And then, like, when they moved venues, they couldn't sell any alcohol because it didn't have a liquor license. But every day, they were able to pay all the employees because they had Bitcoin that they held for 3 years so they could shave off and make sure everybody could go home and feed their families. So now their employees are family. They're not trying to leave that establishment because they've seen that even when these guys aren't earning, they're going to take care of us. So now it creates another communal effect that nobody was thinking of. Oh, it's decentralized. That's not going to do that for you. So meeting them where they are is also, where do you go? Meet those people. Talk to them like you normally do, but about something.
Right. I think one of the things you just said, time, right? I think everybody gets it over time. You'll tell somebody about Bitcoin, and of course the number has gone up, and they all come at that point. I promise you, every time we all have an all-time high, I get 50 inboxes. Every single time. And it's the same people that I said, if you want to get off zero, get some now and then they'll wait 5 years and then get in my inbox again. So my question is, how do you convey the message of time and having a low time preference? How do you convey that to them to make sure that people are patient? They have to understand that there is some patience that is needed in this.
Well, for me, be available when they come back. Don't be a bad guy when they come back and be like, I told you so. And what? No, like, be available when they come back. I know everybody wants to be smug, like I told you, but like, I've had people that for 5 years I've been talking to about Bitcoin. Like 2 years ago they listened, some only came now, 100,000, like, oh, congratulations, Oken. I'm like, congratulations for what?
Yeah.
Like, you're still not.
I want you in it, yeah.
I want you to come with me. Like, this is a journey. And I really think that time, you just have to, like when they say everybody gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve, I think we also need to say everybody gets Bitcoin in the time frame that they deserve. They also got to go through it and be like, what is this? It's a journey. It's not a destination. Like, literally, I see Bitcoin as a journey in that way. And I think that's what we need to kind of change the way we interact with normies about Bitcoin.
I think, zooming out, the hardest challenge we face as workers and wage earners is swallowing the tough pill that we are not going to be the billionaire in life, and we're not going to leapfrog 10 social classes to become kings overnight. The minute that we can realize we have an opportunity to improve our lives, but more importantly, leave something for the next generation. And if you can zoom out and do that, you will be successful in Bitcoin because you'll have the patience to learn, to build, and to hold over time. And that is super important to getting people to get over that concept.
Man, great answers. So, I guess this is the last one. The last one. There goes my time, guy. So my last question is there anything you want to say to wrap up? This has been a very informative panel. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you a lot. Hopefully you guys got some stuff from that. But what are some of the final things that you would like to say that we can do as action items to help you guys achieve your goals wherever you are?
Okay, I'll do it. I'll start. Mine is pretty short. What I would say is, again, like, firstly, meet people where they are and put the PlayStation controller in their hands. Don't speak to them like you're trying to lecture to a university class. Like, if you understand Bitcoin, you should be able to use normal language to speak to somebody on why this helps them, why it's helped you, which is also a great thing. Talk from a personal standpoint, not from a Satoshi Nakamoto standpoint, and a lot more people will understand what you're saying. But more than anything, find a way to put the PlayStation controller in their hands. That's what I'd say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, mine's short too. So to finish, proof of work, right, is something I want to leave people with. So with that, and speaking of time, I want to do a little something special. I want to call up the Secretary General and the CEO of Kenfiba, the Kenya National Fire Brigade Association, and get them on stage because we're going to do a little bit of history here in Kenya. And I want to get Mags, our board member, and Noylin, if she's out here, and also Jadam, if he's out here. Come on stage real quick. This is going to be real fast. 1 minute. Okay, so with what we did was we raised a little bit of funds, and so this is the labor association that represents the firefighters, and in the funds that we raised, I'm going to give them a symbolic wallet representing their custody now of Bitcoin. And they become the first labor union in the country of Kenya to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And so please give them a round of applause. They're firefighters and they're amazing people. Thank you guys. Get up in here too. Yeah, get up in here, come on. We're just gonna do a quick photo. So this is a moment in history right now, and hopefully labor unions will continue to find Bitcoin and add it to the balance sheet.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. We got to get out of here.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. I think that is a first in the continent. Very impressive. So, thank you. We've been seated for quite a while, and one thing I know about myself is that I'm a very good dancer. Oh, you're laughing? Another thing is, I don't dance alone. I dance with other people. So, I'm going to need some music and some people here with me for a dancing competition in a very short while. Please, some music, kindly. Okay, Sharon, but I insist there has to be around two. Please, a different song, more upbeat as well. And if the
toka nayo ati.
All right, then. 2 of you are going to get a prize from us. Thank you very much. Okay. Very much appreciated. We are going to have a third fireside. This is about telling the story of financial revolution through film. And this is a very interesting conversation for me because maybe by show of hand, who has watched The Wolf of Wall Street? The Big Short? And I think there's a third one which I'm forgetting. Oh, yeah. And I think these films were used to express some ideals about how the financial system works. And the next panel is also going to explore how film is being used to teach the same thing within the space. So please, without hesitation, kindly help me welcome on stage Ash Molu.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Final morning of ABC. In true fashion, we're only an hour behind schedule. So I like to get the show on the road. I want to welcome to the stage Desiree and Pierre. And also welcome back Oken to the stage. Thank you. Seat's still warm. Thanks, Lamar.
Hello.
Just want to turn those mics on. All right. Yeah, so this panel is about telling the story of financial revolution through film, and I'm really excited to host this panel. My name is Arsh. I work at the Human Rights Foundation. I just want to do a quick, brief intros for the panel.
First of all, thank you, ABC, for having me and having all of us. I think this is a conversation that doesn't get had a lot. I'm Desiree. I'm Puerto Rican, filmmaker, storyteller. I am head of marketing of Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. I have a background in science, which that scientific preparation and that curiosity has led me down the rabbit hole of what I do today. I got orange-pilled working on a film with one of my most beloved friends, Alana Menavia, called Dirty Coin, and that was the big adventure to see how Bitcoin and energy innovation can really impact the world. It was incredible. And yeah, my big mission is to basically unite these technical, complex stories together with the human potential.
Sure. So I'm Pierre Corbin. In 2021, I quit my corporate job because I wanted to work in Bitcoin. And the first thing I decided to make was a documentary. It's called The Great Reset and the Rise of Bitcoin. It's got over 2 million views on YouTube. And from there, I created the Bitcoin Film Fest. In fact, we were supposed to have a different representative for the Bitcoin Film Fest here from the region. That couldn't make it, so yep, they asked me to come on stage. And but the point of the Bitcoin Film Fest is to show films that are Bitcoin topics or Bitcoin adjacent, so very freedom focused. We did 2 editions so far. It happens in Poland, Warsaw, and the third one is in May 24 to 25. So I, welcome all of you to join. In my filmmaking journey, my film, of course, I released it on YouTube. It's open on there, and I was censored for 2 months. My film wasn't discoverable on YouTube. The ad revenue that I got from YouTube was blocked for about 4 months. And this kind of got me a bit obsessed about self-custody, other payment solutions that are more peer-to-peer for business. And so I also founded a company called Flash that does Bitcoin payments.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm Oken. Thank you again for having me on the stage for another time. Well, I'll give a bit of a different part of who I am. So before Bitcoin, I got my MBA in China, but generally I'm a writer. Initially, I've been a poet since I was 14 years old. I've been on different anthologies around the world, and also I was the first African podcaster to be paid in Bitcoin. Streamed Bitcoin while people were listening to my podcast. So, thank you. So for me, it's a different journey than the education of Bitcoin. It's always been a use case for me. And I believe in the storytelling aspects of how people come around to things rather than just, throwing facts at them.
Yeah, I mean, the three of you work on really interesting stuff. I think the common denominator is storytelling, right? So how, with all of your work in Bitcoin, in storytelling, how has that shaped the perspective of Bitcoin through film, through writing? And how does it have the potential to shape the perspective of others?
Wow, yeah. Well, getting to work first on a film and then, other projects as well, you start to see that Bitcoin really is just the beginning, right? There are so many more aspects to it, including the internet and our identities, how we're going to live out our digital lives. And it just gives me goosebumps. It's just when we say revolution, it clearly is a revolution for humankind, right? So getting to travel around and collect stories and start weaving together this understanding, this global understanding of what's going on, the big picture, is very powerful, I believe.
For me, the power of storytelling around Bitcoin, I remember trying to get my mother and family members on this why Bitcoin thing. And there was, I just can't remember the name of the movie now, but there was a documentary of a student he's a filmmaker and student from the US who literally was sitting, I think somewhere in LA. He had his class there and he was in Africa. And he was in South Africa somewhere in Joburg. And he had connected a Bitcoin wallet, on-chain wallet, to the actual electricity, what's it called? You purchase power, pay-as-you-go power, and he connected it in a way that while the people were sitting in the classroom in the US and the teachers were sitting in the dark in Joburg, he had them make a Bitcoin payment and you saw the lights go on, right? 15 minutes later. And that in itself, just the story of how that came to be, was where my mother was like, okay, let's talk about this now. So the power of storytelling really isn't just about the story you're telling, but for those that are listening or watching and how they now come to a realization of wow, this is something different than I thought it was from the narrative I've been given the whole time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I was always a fan of cinema. It's always something I really liked, even though that's really not what I was working in. It's just something I had a lot of passion for. I always liked, making travel videos and the like. And, when I really started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole is when I, just like every Bitcoiner, felt like I had a story to tell, right? Everyone needs to listen to this. And, I just had too much time after quitting my job, as I said. So I thought, okay, let's just put these stories down on paper and just get into editing, because I think I enjoy the process. Just geeking out on my computer is something that I enjoy. I'm also a programmer, so that's obviously something you have to enjoy. And very quickly, especially when you make a documentary that resonates with people, you start realizing that, okay, maybe the past 9 months I spent working every day on my film actually is worth something, because even people that have worked all their life in finance would just come to me, tell me, look, Pierre, I've never seen a film that explains the financial system as well as that, and that gives the context of Bitcoin and really gets them into the Bitcoin space. I think that's, you know, it's very powerful, of course, very flattering for myself, definitely, but it shows the impact that storytelling can have. And I think it can scale very quickly. And there's different ways of storytelling, right? There's, of course, you can write things, there's podcasts, there's shorter video format. I personally like long format. Because if you get them hooked in the first, 5-10 minutes, well, then you get them to sit and watch for an hour and a half your film, and you get to like push your entire story and narrative and tell other stories and get other people's words out as well.
Yeah, and you never know when that piece, right, someone really needs to see inspires like a whole other thing that they never had thought about before, which is just like the most incredible thing to see people's faces every time when, we've done screenings, and it's just like those aha moments, like, wow, I didn't know Bitcoin could do that. That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, so keeping it with you, Desiree, I mean, what's an example of a story that you've had the opportunity to display, whether that's through film or whether that's through podcast or writing?
Yeah, I want to say Gridless was my big aha moment, getting to help with the interviews on that with Janet, who was incredible. She explained it so well. I was just blown away. That, and I have done some other work that will come out later on in the future with, especially with the Human Rights Foundation, on the human rights side. And it's more the broader perspective of like, where this is going, right? Like I said, Bitcoin is so much more than we could even imagine. It's becoming a world.
Yeah, I mean, same question to you, Oken, here.
I think, storytelling has this way. Africans are mostly oral, like our way from history of transferring knowledge is storytelling, right? So I really do think that for us, it's so entrenched in who we are and how we communicate and how we pass on knowledge that storytelling, podcasting, let me give you as an example, is like literally a digital version of sitting around a fire and telling people a story. How that story is conveyed, though, is different than how it's perceived, right, by most people. I can tell something in one way, but how you're perceiving that is a totally different thing. So I think when it comes to storytelling from this aspect, it's more of a way of saying, for me it was, how do I tell the story without me telling the story? How do I tell the story so that you feel like your uncle's telling you, your cousin's telling you, your brother's telling you, your sister's telling you? And that for me in podcasting was to bring people on that also are storytellers in their own right, whether they're designers, whether they're writers, whether they're musicians, and in that way extract a story that somebody else can relate to, but not that I'm orating. And I think that gives another value to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm working on a second documentary. It's called The Fight for the US Dollar. It's been already 2 years now, so we'll see when that gets released. But I did already 40 hours of interviews for it, and I'm French and Spanish, but grew up with a French education. I interviewed Farida for it, and we wanted to talk really about. I wanted to talk really about the CFA franc, and in France, people don't know like what's up with the CFA franc. And for me, that was, of course, I already had done a bunch of research before talking to her, but having this conversation was just, big revelation. And because in France, people, they think, well, we did good, we do good in the region, and like it's, I find it crazy. And instantly after that interview, I sent it to all of my friends. Like, you gotta watch this, guys, because like it's crazy. Like, and stop saying, yeah, but we helped in development, and without us, like they'd like just kill each other. Like literally, that's the kind of stuff I heard, right? And so it's, these kind of stories that I think are important to be able to share to a greater scale, and also, generally speaking, being able to explain the struggles that some people have had, or the lack of opportunity some may have. I interviewed Roman Martinez. He's from Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, and his story is before Bitcoin came into El Zonde, your opportunity in life really depended on what side of the street you were born. If you were born towards the ocean, you'd be a fisherman. If it was the other side, you were going to be a farmer. There was no other option. And I think, these are the kind of things that are important to show, to tell, and other people can tell this so much better than we can. That's the point of, doing all these interviews and trying to put this into these nice stories that will bring all these emotions to people so they can relate to them and understand why, change is needed, because that's what we're here for.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess communication, right? We all have different perspectives and different ways of seeing the world and talking about it. And as storytellers, it is a big responsibility to figure that out and to, create understanding, right? So,
And Pierre, you mentioned the story with Farida, who actually had a big hand in bringing us all together here today and telling our own stories. What role do you think Africa can play in storytelling, and how can we empower the people in the audience to tell their own stories? Like, personally, I've been so inspired by hearing and talking to people, hearing about their stories from all around the continent.
Yeah, well, so it's my first time in Africa, actually. And I've been to a bunch of Bitcoin conferences, so it's also my first Bitcoin conference in Africa. And there's a completely different story being told. Like, it's so much more about how to use Bitcoin as opposed to how can I buy as much Bitcoin as possible and try and get rich as quickly as I can. Like, we get a lot of this, right? In Europe or in the US, that's kind of always the big topics that work the best, that has the more people in the audience. Whereas here, it's really more about how can we use it. Like, it's really solving a problem day to day, not just a get rich quick scheme. And I think that's an important story. I think that's the story that everyone needs to hear, because this is really what we're working for, right? It's everyone should use the non-custodial peer-to-peer payment solutions. Anything other than that is just not good enough. And it just empowers a lot of people. Now, when it comes to being able to do something, I'm a pretty good example. I never did film, and then I just decided to make an hour and 20-minute film, right? Like, anyone can do it. It's work, yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hustle. I'm not saying it's easy. The first film, I completely self-financed myself, so that makes it, in a sense, easier, I guess. The second film, of course, much more ambitious. Money is needed. That's an entire problem in and of itself. You need to chase people down. There's no money to be made in filmmaking, especially documentary filmmaking is very difficult. So you just get a lot of rejection. That's the hard part of it. And even when you get a success, you get a sponsor that doesn't follow through and doesn't pay. And all of a sudden you've got your script writer that is waiting on his $4,000 payment for now 6 months, right? And it's just, the good thing is, we're all very passionate here, and we all just care about the story, putting the film out there. It's not about the money, but unfortunately, money is needed to make films as well.
Yeah, that's how you know the story is worth being told, right? Like, when you constantly, it might not always be rewarding. There's oftentimes funding issues with that, right? Oken, as someone who currently lives on the continent, right? I guess what's your opinion here? How can we get more Africans to tell their own stories? And if someone in the audience wants to start creating content, if they want to start writing, shooting a podcast, shooting films, what's something that they can do to get involved?
Great question. So I'd say everybody has a story to tell, as we all know, right? Everybody has a story to tell. And I think it's about trying to create a platform for people to be able to tell that story. Like, when I did my podcast, it wasn't to tell my story. It was so that other people could tell their stories. But that podcast was created during COVID. I already had the material and none of us could go out. But I knew a lot of creatives around the world, within Africa, outside Africa. So it became a thing of, let's create a podcast where, and I didn't at the point in time know how to do any of that, right? I didn't know how to do video editing. I didn't know how to do audio editing. Yes, I was a musician. I go in, I record, I leave. I don't do any of the back end stuff. But once I put up the podcast, and I was like, okay, let me call this person up. And then it was like, let's show the world the conversations creatives have when there's no cameras around. Like, I need you to feel comfortable and tell your story. What this allowed was for people to see, hey, there's more than just what I thought about this person or about this industry. And that's what we really need here, is to allow people to expose the rest of us, not to what we think the story is, but to what the story actually is, told by the person living the story. So I'd say that the biggest challenge is trying to not center everything around yourself, actually allowing other people to shine in their stories, and then realizing that by doing that, we not only get to spread our stories as Africans further, but we get to reinforce those stories. We get to be able to, you know, again, sit around a digital campfire and be like, oh, well, this actually resonates with me because this is what happened in my life, without being interrupted. Like, no, we don't want to hear that. We've heard it already. Next person, like, type of thing. And in the form of like a podcast, I say, again, I didn't know how to use command line before 2019. Before COVID hit, I didn't know how to do any of the recordings, but the resources are everywhere. Literally, YouTube, you can learn how to audio edit, video edit. So whatever you're thinking in your mind of like, how do I get my story and the story of my people or the people I know need the story told, jump in. Just literally the same way with Bitcoin, rabbit hole it. Dive off, there's no way back up, and just figure out how to grab onto a wall or something around you. And in that, you start realizing you're not falling. You're like almost gliding down, you know, to a place of safety. And the more you work around telling other people's stories, you realize that your story isn't insignificant. It adds to a greater story.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been said before, but if we don't tell our stories, someone else will, right? And I mean, I'm from Puerto Rico. I have deep African roots myself. However, we also have a problem of electrification. And what's inspired me to work in this industry is Gridless. It's like Africans telling their stories, right? So we need more of that. And I think it's a global effort. So don't forget that, you know, fragmentation is by design. So don't forget to unite and collaborate with the people who really want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking in the audience, just briefly, right? I'm seeing people who have just, you know, recently started with what they're doing, and it's already made such a huge impact. For me personally, and I'm sure many other people as well. We have a couple more minutes left. I just want to, you know, close it out. If you guys have anything else to add, any remarks, but also maybe a call to action, right? Like, how can people get involved in what you're doing personally?
Yeah, so to say this isn't something I just do alone, and neither is for them. We do need support, and their support comes in many ways, right? And even a job, right? But we have this gift to do it, and we want to continue doing it. So, yeah, it takes a village, and my colleague just showed me Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. If you have a chance, please go ahead and read it. It's very inspiring. It gives you more of a sense of unity. Like, on this planet, we're all gonna die. We're all gonna, like, how many, what was it, like, kings and queens and blood spilt out in the rivers. And it's this tiny little thing in space, right? So let's work together to make some kind of sense out of it.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the best things that comes out of being a creative in this space is, as you just said, like, you're not alone. There are others that you can lean on. There are others you can learn from. And just in general, like, jump off the cliff, right? You're already at the top. You can see what's happening. Jump off the cliff, right? And see what happens. Because, like, a lot of people are fearful. They're like, okay, I have this idea. Like, I think it's going to be great. But maybe their best friend was like, that's rubbish. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to give up. Like, just jump off the cliff, literally, and see if it works. Because either you're going to enjoy the journey, learn something from the journey, or you're going to regret not taking the journey, watching somebody else take the journey you wanted to take. And then they're prospering, and you're like, I could have also done that, but you didn't. You decided not to jump off the cliff. And that's, as a creative, as somebody that makes something that was in your mind become something real, you need to have the conviction to say, I'm okay to fail. Be okay to fail, because I've always said there's no such thing as a real loss when it comes to, like, creating. It's about learning how not to do something. Like I learned that's not the way to do that. I learned by doing it though, you know? So I think that's really what I would say is collaborate, but don't be afraid to like take a chance on yourself.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you're not alone, that's for sure, but also there's a real audience in the Bitcoin space. I mean, when I made my film, I was hoping for like 50,000 views on YouTube, right? And like it went up to 2 million, which was crazy. There's a real audience out there. I mean, I think we know as Bitcoiners, like we just absorb content. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do. And even when it comes to just being involved, getting involved in Bitcoin film in particular, there's many different ways of doing that. I mean, of course, if you have, you know, a bunch of money, you can finance different projects out there. Everyone is always looking for money. It's very hard to make films. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Many people need to be involved. But even if you have just a few sats, there's so many projects that are on Geyser, the crowdfunding platform. I even myself have a project there. And there's a lot of films there that are looking for funding, help from the community. But it goes even beyond that. With the Bitcoin Film Fest, we have, of course, a Telegram group. It's called the Bitcoin Cinema Chat. And, you know, you can just check the bitcoinfilmfest.com website also to be redirected to it. On that chat, there's always filmmakers that are looking for help, that are looking for stories, that are traveling to certain places. They, you know, maybe looking for locals that can help them either get access to stories, get access to equipment, whatever it is. So there, I mean, there's a lot that can be done. And if you just, you know, want to get your get an idea of what this is like, yeah, come also to the Bitcoin Film Fest in May 24th, 25th. I think that's where you can meet the community.
Just to add to that, for those of you in the room that are like, but all of the stories that people like want to know has been told already, they haven't. I remember sitting down beginning of this year with Femi, and Femi was like, he looked at me and he's like, somebody has to write the Bitcoin standard from an African standpoint. Like, who's gonna write that? Who's gonna write the next big Bitcoin? Like, we have Broken Money by Len Alden, but who's writing the African version of Broken Money from an African standpoint of why it's broken for us, different for why it's broken for other people. Like, there are so many stories to still write and tell. Each one of you in this audience could be another book that somebody picks up and is like, I get it now. Because they might not get it from another standpoint. So just wanted to end off with that.
Yeah, and shout out to Charlene as well, who wrote the
Yeah. She's been a super inspirational storyteller for myself and I'm sure for many, many more. Yeah. I want to add the work that you guys are doing at Bitcoin Film Fest is incredible. They've given me a platform to really grow and put myself out there with my film partner. So, and if you guys have a chance to go to the next Bitcoin Film Fest, do it. It's just so incredible. We actually got to celebrate on the halving. We partied and then Dirty Coin was
Yeah, I think it was the biggest halving
premiered.
party in the world. Yeah. Just
Oh my God, you guys
everyone
are doing
2
great work.
a.m. drunk, looking at the block clock and waiting for it and just hugging, happy halving, happy halving. Yeah. Unfortunately, no halving next year though.
We should have a Bitcoin Film Fest here in Africa for sure.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I agree with that one.
I like the idea.
I've met some incredible storytellers, and every time, I mean, I came here last year, and I'm just always still blown away by everyone here. So,
Well, I'll just end by saying, you know, if anyone wants to get into the realm of what these folks are working on and tell your story, you know, come find the panelists. This is the last day of the conference. Come engage, get involved, and with that, let's get a round of applause for the panel.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
There's one last item, kindly. We are very big on card games today. So I'd like the moderator to take this card and ask the panelists one last question on this card.
Okay, don't mind if I do. Okay, so we have a question. The question is, who's most likely to start a podcast or a blog and abandon it after 2 months? It's who's most likely to start a podcast or blog and abandon it after 2 months?
Out of the three of us or other people?
Just in general, right? Both. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's very difficult because especially something like a podcast. You know, if I think of me and the films that I make, it's much more passive. Like I can kind of do it when I want. Like there's whereas a podcast is something you need to stick to. Like you really have to do it like every week, like once a week, twice a week. I don't know. It depends on the format you have. Of course, it can be once a month, but you know, you need this consistency, and that's I think. Yeah, that's the hard part. I myself tried starting a podcast, and I didn't stick to it because it's just tough. But
Okay, now we have the answer.
I think as creatives, we like to fail fast. So we'll try many mediums, right, to keep moving forward, and sometimes some things just don't work, right? I remember one time I went ahead and like recorded something, and I couldn't even listen. I was like, oh no more. But that's you know, to go back to what you were saying, you just got to keep doing it. And even if you feel like you failed, you're going to pick something up that's going to like create that spark, right? So even if, you know, I'm sure we've all had our fair shares of projects that are still on the back burner, but yeah, that's part of the process.
You guys are spicy. They want you to name drop.
Basically, I'm least likely to be the one, right?
No, you got proof of work.
I have a little bit of experience in it. So I'd say from the three of us, who's most likely? It's Pierre, bro. Like, he just said it himself.
That's true. No, but if I can give one advice though, especially if you're like, you know, you're thinking 2 months ahead, just contact a bunch of people, schedule podcasts for the next 3 months. It's in your calendar. You have no choice.
Yeah.
You'll do it, and you're certain you do more than 2 months then.
Well, there you have it. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. So, kindly requesting for the very last fireside before we break out. And the person who's going to lead this is someone who doesn't need any introduction. Please help me welcome Obi.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. And now, well, someone else who doesn't need an introduction, because she's already had an introduction just a few minutes ago, is none other than our favorite, Charlene Fadirepo. Woo! So, working? Maybe press the button.
Testing. Hello, everyone. Again.
Okay.
Good to be here again.
So, Charlene, you've been busy again.
Have.
I mean, so you are prolific. You are active. You've been active for years with advocacy, educating policymakers in the US, working with Bitcoin, with... okay, interesting. Okay. I won't reveal what he said.
Oh, boy.
But, so working with policymakers in the US, working with Bitcoin, with women in Bitcoin, with Satoshi Sisters Circle, and many other things. One of the things you've just done is release a new book. It's incredibly interesting. It's very relevant to everything that's been discussed up until now. I was actually just joking with you earlier, saying that all of this, the last talks have effectively been a lead up to this book and this panel right now. And it's your third book now, actually.
It is my third book.
And I think it's really interesting for everybody to understand and go through this book. But before we do that, something that Charlene doesn't really do a lot of is actually talk about herself. And you'll understand why when we talk about the book. So I thought it made sense to just give a bit of your story, your background, before we talk about other people's stories.
Awesome. So, again, my name is Charlene Hill Fadirepo. I'm a Bitcoin banker, activist, and advocate. I run a company called Mango Digital Strategies. We help banks future-proof their growth through Bitcoin. And I am the author of the Bitcoin Leap. And my Bitcoin story is really interesting. So I came to Bitcoin with about 15 years of management, Big Four management consulting experience. I also worked at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, so I'm a former regulator. So I come to Bitcoin with a very focused fintech and banking and finance lens. But I joined Bitcoin at about 2020, and at the time, I was running a wealth tech startup. So I was really into financial education, and we were training Black American women investors how to get smarter about their money. And I was getting questions from my clients about Bitcoin. Now, these were women who did not have a lot of financial education, and they were low to moderate income. And I thought that was very interesting. Around that same time, my husband, who is Nigerian, said to me, "You should check out this Bitcoin thing." And, you know, if you guys remember 2020, it was a time where the world stood still. You took the time to pay attention, and I did. I spent about 3 months researching Bitcoin. I jumped on Clubhouse, found this wonderful community called the Black Bitcoin Billionaires. Shout out to Lamar, CJ, Justin, Fred Barber. Jumped online and just was blown away by this incredible community. That's where I cut my teeth in Bitcoin. I learned how to talk about Bitcoin. I learned how to make the case. And once I understood Bitcoin as a tool for sound money, something clicked, because I remember an experience that I had in 2015. So my family, we spent
before you found out about Bitcoin. This experience.
Yeah. So, you know, this idea of Bitcoin as sound money reminded me of this 2015 experience. We were in Lagos. I was shopping. As you can see, I like to shop. We were in Balogun Market, which is one of the largest open-air markets in West Africa. I had my money. And the first thing we had to do, we couldn't go to the bank. And as a banker, I was like, what is this? So we had to drive around Balogun Market to find our Hausa guy. And our Hausa guy was going to help us change our money. So of course,
changer.
Exactly. So Hausa, of course, is one of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria. So that took 30 minutes, and I was annoyed about that. I went shopping, and in that 2-week vacation period, the value of the Naira in my pocket dropped. And for me, that was just a shock. And so again, I was shopping for artwork and clothes, but I could only imagine how painful that would have been if I was trying to put food on my table, if I was trying to buy shoes for my children, or if I was trying to pay for health care for my family. And, you know, that experience clicked for me, and it said to me that, so this Bitcoin thing it's interesting and cool for the West, but in Africa, it's going to change the world. And after I had that realization, I pivoted and said, I'm going to put all of my effort, everything I know about banking, into really focusing on making sure Bitcoin can be a success in Africa.
And that's well, possible.
Oh, thanks.
I think it was around that time when you started to double down.
I did.
I think it was around that time when you started to double down and really focus on how Bitcoin can empower Africa. That's when I first started to really start to talk to you. But you are someone who has had the benefit of seeing, partly because of your familial relations, your husband and so on, and extended family, and also your own upbringing and experience, to see two worlds, the West and Africa. How would you say, in your mind, there's the difference in terms of how people view and how we use and interact with Bitcoin in these two different realities?
Yeah, so, you know, we've talked a lot about this idea of narratives, this whole conference, and I think this idea of narratives is really important. So if you think of the traditional narrative for Bitcoin in the West, you know, it is a investment-focused store of value narrative, and we say things like, stay humble and stack sats, right? So again, very, very Western-centric. I always thought that was tone deaf, because we know that Bitcoin is for the world and not the West. And if you think about the African perspective, it's a much broader use case. In Africa, I think what's more important, you say things like, well, what's more effective is you build, you earn, you learn in sats. And this speaks to a more complex use case for Bitcoin. So certainly in Africa, you have the use case where you're focusing on the store of value. But more importantly, you're looking at the use case where this is a medium of exchange where you can transfer inflation-resistant value from one country to another. And to me, that is just the most powerful use case for Bitcoin. And what does that look like? It looks like cross-border payments. It looks like remittances from the US to Nigeria. It looks like importers being able to actually purchase things in Bitcoin because, as we heard earlier, in many countries like Nigeria, there's restrictions on capital flows, restrictions on dollars. And so, you just see Bitcoin is just opening up a lot of economic channels that have been closed because of history.
So, so the book, you mentioned the name, but the book is The Bitcoin Leap.
Yep.
And it talks about how Bitcoin is transforming Africa. And also I think it talks about how Africa indirectly is transforming Bitcoin. But what's really interesting about it, and you mentioned it here, and it's been talked about all the way through, is that you don't just talk about what Bitcoin is and how it works and about yourself, but you spend a lot of time talking through and describing the stories of various people in the African space who are working on Bitcoin, and you describe their struggles and their stories, and you bring them to life. And that, I think, is what makes it really unique. In fact, so unique that when it was launched, it's already, only recently launched, it's already in the Amazon top 100 books for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency worldwide. So clearly it's saying something different and unique and really powerful. And I want to ask you two questions related to this. One is, why are you so focused on telling people's stories? What makes you most focused on that and bring them to life? And then I want to get into some examples of stories. But first of all, just what drives you to do that?
Well, I'll take a step back and just say that this book is really a celebration of African innovation or Bitcoin innovation in Africa. Sometimes the idea of innovation is only reserved for certain countries. It's only reserved for certain people. And the more time I've spent in Bitcoin, the incredible genius that is right here on this continent is really incredible. So I also think that there are a lot of Bitcoin books that are out there, but there's no Bitcoin book that centers the African Bitcoin story until now. And that's really important. And it's important to tell everyone's story because we want everyone in this room to see themselves in the Bitcoin space. You've heard throughout this entire conference that it's about building, it's about creating, it's about finding your place in the Bitcoin space. If all of the examples and all of the success stories are for people that are far, far away from you, then you might come away with this idea that this thing is not for you, that you're not ready, that you don't have the tools, that you don't have the ideas. And that is absolutely not the case. What was so apparent for me in this book was that we have everything that we need to be successful in this Bitcoin ecosystem. And, I think telling these entrepreneurial stories will allow this next generation of builders to feel very confident and affirmed in their ability to lead the change in terms of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think 100% agree. I think role models help. I remember when Obama became president, and just every time I walk down the street and I see another black person, we just nod at each other, knowing it's possible, guys, it's possible.
It can happen.
And when you hear these stories and you know what the struggles that some of these amazing people have gone through and the way you bring them to life, it just is going to, for each story, there's going to be 100, 1,000 people, men and women, boys and girls who are going to be inspired to go further, go faster. So give us, but let's make this real. Give us some examples.
So I guess the first theme is that there are Africa has some very unique problems, and there are African innovators on the ground solving them. So in the book, you'll meet someone that you heard on stage yesterday, Katatso Nako, who is the pioneer of Manchankura. So he is solving for internet poverty in Africa. Right now, internet penetration in Africa is 43%. He's allowing people to buy Bitcoin without internet service, right? A really unique problem, African problem, and he created a solution. So you'll meet him. In the book, you'll meet Sudan Hoddle, who is actually an emergency, thank you. Sudan Hadl is an emergency medicine doctor. He lives in Europe, but he started this incredible Telegram group in Sudan. And so this Telegram group was originally designed to help Sudanese businessmen do export import. But in early January 2021, when Sudan was going through economic crises, he was able to use this Telegram group to provide humanitarian aid in Sudan. So you'll learn about Sudan Hadl. I also have to shout out Marcel Lorraine, who's the founder of Bitcoin Data, who is doing incredible work to support women in Kenya. I don't know if there are datas in the room, and all over the country. So again, we didn't have to go anywhere. These folks are not doing this because a government told them so. They're not doing it because there was a foreign body that flew in and say, hey, you should pay attention. They're doing it because they're recognizing that there's some unique problems on the ground, and they're creating solutions to fix those problems. And there are many, many stories like that, from East to West Africa, from North to South Africa.
So I've been asked to make this a little bit shorter because I would love us to continue, but let's round it up. What are the next steps for you? What are the next steps for the Bitcoin Leap?
So the next steps for the Bitcoin Leap, it is my hope and dream to take this book and to share it with every college campus, both in Africa and the United States. And so I'm embarking on a journey to connect with African universities and, universities in the United States, because like we said before, I really need the next generation of builders to see themselves in the Bitcoin space. I need them to know about the global utility of Bitcoin. I need them to see that there are people building on-ramps and off-ramps that are from Kenya, from Ghana, from Nigeria, and I need them to take charge and find their place, because this thing is moving fast and we don't have a lot of time. So I look forward to connecting with universities, and if there's anyone in this room, and I've talked to some people that can help me forge partnerships with universities in Africa and also in the United States, I would welcome a connection, because I think that's next. I would love for this. I'm excited about contributing this book to the canon of Bitcoin literature, and it's my opinion that Bitcoin and Africa, or Africa, presents the most compelling use case for Bitcoin that exists. So I think this is where you start. When you're teaching Bitcoin, you start with Africa, and then you talk about all the other use cases. Because when you start with Africa and you explain the global utility, people get it. They don't do Bitcoin because it's cool. They do Bitcoin because it is solving very important problems on the continent.
Thank you very much. Bitcoin Leap.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you guys. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thank you guys.
All right. Thank you very much. So, two quick announcements. Yeah, we're going to break out into other sessions. HRF on second floor with BTrust, and then on first floor we have TBD. And of course, I have been informed by Bitcoin Data that they have a VR game at their stand, virtual reality game that anyone can go play and earn some sats. So thank you very much for participating in this session. Kindly see you at 2:15 p.m. Thank you.